Welcome everyone to the 5th Blender art critique video on my channel. So I try to make art critique videos about every 2 weeks. This video has been a little late and I do apologize for that. I have been a little bit busy recently and I was also working on getting that texture painting for beginners tutorial out. So I do apologize that this video is a little late. But normally I try to make art critique videos about every 2 weeks. So if you'd like your artwork to be in the next art critique video, you can submit your artwork through the Google Forms that I provide with the link in the description. So for this week we have 6 artworks. So we actually have 2 renders, 2 animations, and then 2 Blender files. Now I'm not able to critique all of the art that's sent in, so I do apologize if your artwork didn't make it in the video. And before we start, I did just want to remind you that I'm not trying to criticize you or your work. I'm just trying to give you feedback so that you can improve your artwork and become a better artist. And of course, my feedback are just my opinions, so you can totally feel free to disagree. So this first one comes from Outmind. So Outmind sent in this really cool architecture scene, and they said they made this in a little over 4 hours as a daily challenge. And the challenge limited the participants to only use the color yellow. So that's really cool. I do enjoy art challenges. So you were very creative with the yellow theme because you could only make things that were yellow. I really like the kind of abstract paintings that you added in here. I really like this one because it kind of looks like it has a normal map. So it kind of looks like some parts have thicker areas of paint, like kind of along here and along here. And you also made some really creative names for all these books. The Yellow Mile, 50 Shades of Yellow, Fried Yellow Tomatoes. And then I don't actually know what this one says. It says Hunt for the Yellow October. It looks like it might say Hunt for the Yellow October, but I'm not sure. Let me know in the comments if that is Hunt for the Yellow October. And then also right down here we have a Clockwork Yellow. So that's pretty cool. And I really like the texture that you used on the walls here. It really is quite nice. And the floor here, I really like that texture. And yeah, the lighting is very good. I like that there's like a very, very slight glow to the windows. I also really like that this scene feels very balanced because there's a lot of things kind of in the center, like this shelf right here, and then also the couch and the table, but then there's some things that are a little bit different. Like this painting is a little bit bigger, this one's a bit smaller, there's this shelf here and there's nothing over here, and then there's the light coming over here. So it's really balanced, but it is a little bit different on either side, which I really like. Let's go over how I would critique this. So you said that you could only use the color yellow, and that is a really cool challenge, and you can do some pretty cool stuff with that. But I don't know about you, but for me, I feel like this has a very green tint. So the lighting is very cool, how it's very bright and kind of shining in. How you created the scene feels very calm and welcoming and like comforting. You have a nice soft couch and some books and stuff, which makes the scene feel really welcoming. But I think that this green color is kind of making it feel a little bit more like post-apocalyptic or something like that, and it makes the whole scene feel a little bit more grungy and a little bit more dark. So what I would do is change the colors a bit, and I just color corrected this image in Krita, and I would make it look a bit more like this. Now this isn't exactly how I would do it, but this is pretty close to kind of what I was thinking. So this way it's a lot more yellow. You can kind of see this compared to this. Suddenly this actually looks a lot more green and kind of grungy and a little bit older and not so welcoming, but this feels very bright and it feels very warm and has a lot of energy. And there's the nice strong white and yellow kind of golden light shining in, and it just feels very warm and more comfortable. So I think that if you change the lighting a bit or just color corrected it to something like this, I think it would look a lot better. Now, as far as the pillows goes, I think that they are pretty stiff. If you kind of look at them right here, this pillow almost looks like it's floating. I feel like these pillows probably would be sagging just a little bit in the middle, be kind of coming down like that. And I kind of feel like they're floating a little bit. They'd kind of be sagging and falling down. Also, the shape of every pillow is pretty much exactly the same. I can't really see much of a difference. And also they're mirrored exactly the same. So this one's kind of coming up, that one's kind of coming up. So what I would do is change the shape of the pillows a little bit, make some just slightly bigger or slightly smaller, and make some of them kind of sagging in a little bit more, and just change the wrinkles a little bit. So some of them just have some wrinkles in a little bit different areas, just make it a little bit more unique. And then also, if you added some sort of texture to the pillows, I think they would look a lot more interesting, because right now they almost just look kind of like a very basic white or like almost like a shiny plastic material. So if you just wanted to add a basic fabric texture and put that on the pillows, I think that would help as well. And then you could make them yellow if you wanted to. Now the other thing that I would do is make this texture a lot bigger, because this texture is quite small, and I actually think that the texture probably should be doubled in size. It just seems like that size for each wood tile is pretty small, so I think having each wood tile something like that, or maybe just like this big, would be better. Then the other thing that I would do is only use one texture for the couch. So you have this really nice material here, I really like this, but then you also have this material, and I actually don't really like the rest of the material on the couch. It kind of just looks a bit dirty, and I'm not quite sure what it was, but I kind of feel like this doesn't really look like fabric, but I do really like this material right here. Maybe you could scale it down and make it a little bit more detailed, but what I would do is just all this kind of material and this kind of material and like this material right here, I would make that all this material, because I do really like this. I think it looks pretty nice. And also most couches have the same fabric across the entire thing, so just having it consistent I think would really help. And then the last thing that I would do is lower the camera a little bit, because with how high the camera is right now, I feel like I'm either really tall or I'm like standing on a chair or a stool or a table or something, because I think most people would probably be about this big. I don't know exactly for sure, but judging from the couch, I think that probably they'd be about that big, so their eye level would probably be something like that. And so if their eye level is about that high going around the scene, then you would need to bring down the camera a little bit. And I think that this would really help to make it feel more realistic, because with how it is right now, most people aren't really going to see a room from that high up unless you are, standing on a stool or something, or if you're really high up. So if you just lowered it to a standing height or a sitting height, like maybe someone's standing in this room and that's their perspective, or maybe they're sitting in another couch or a chair or something, then I think that would make it feel more realistic. So just move the camera down a little bit. I feel like right now the camera is probably about this high, and it needs to be more like that high. But overall, this is a really cool scene, and for doing it just a little over 4 hours, that is really cool. But yeah, really the biggest thing I think would be just changing that color correction, making it really bright and warm and yellow, and it makes it feel a lot more friendly and warm and welcome. I think that would really help. So thank you Outmind for sending in this artwork. Alright, and this next artwork comes from Roken Price. So this is a really cool scene. It's quite realistic, and I really like that there are some little bees here flying around the nature scene. It's really cool. And so you said that you use the botanic light, the vegetation light, and the grass essentials. And for those of you who don't know what those are nature asset packs that you can purchase on websites like the Blender Market. And then you said that the bee model was from Blend Swap, but you modified it somewhat to fit your scene. And the textures, poses, and hair particles have all been modified. So overall, this is a really nice nature scene. I do really like it, and I am not very good at nature, so I don't have very many critiques. But I did just notice a couple things that I would do to improve this. So the first thing that I would do is make the stripes on the bees just a little bit stronger. So I just kind of drew it on in Krita just so you can see what I'm talking about. Now this might be a little bit too strong. You might want it to be a little bit more subtle than this, but hopefully you can see what I'm talking about. So when I first saw these bees, I thought that the black stripes just looked a little bit too subtle, but my drawing here might be a little bit too strong, so you might want them to be a little bit more subtle than that. But I think adding some darker stripes would help to make them look more like bees. I just think that with how they are now, you can barely see the stripes, and they kind of just look like they're all like in kind of an orangey brown color. So just making those dark stripes a little bit easier to see and a little bit stronger, I think would help a lot. And then the other thing that I would do is to make these daisies a little bit higher, because there are a lot of daisies in the scene and they do look really cool, but I feel like they should be taller than the grass. Right now, like all the grass is taller than them, and they're kind of like way down here, kind of buried within the grass. So I think just popping them up and making them a little bit taller, not as tall as these dandelions, but just kind of just a little bit taller than the grass, I think would help. And I pulled up some reference images online, and so here are some daisies, and then there's also some dandelions, and it looks like the daisies are usually taller than the grass. Now, you may be able to find reference images of daisies that are smaller than the grass, but when I was looking at some different images, most of the daisies seem to be taller than the grass. But it does just overall look nicer because you'd probably want to look at the flowers more than the grass. But also just walking around outside and seeing this type of foliage, I always remember that the daisies are usually a bit higher than the grass. So I think that just popping those up, making them a little bit higher, would really help. But that's it really. Overall, this is a super awesome nature scene. I have never made anything this realistic, so this is really good. Well done. So thank you, Roken, for sending in this artwork. Alright, and this next artwork is an animation, and this one comes from Kiko Does CG. So let's just play through this animation. So we have a really cool lighthouse scene, and it kind of has a low poly style to it. And it looks like we have like a dock there, that's pretty cool, and a boat. And then it kind of goes around and you can kind of see the lighthouse. It looks like you might have done my low poly nature tutorial. I noticed that some of the assets looked like it was from my tutorial. There's a little fish kind of swimming around. Pretty cool. Yeah, that looks like from that log looks like it's from my low poly nature tutorial. Alright, and there we go. And you said that you really wanted feedback on your camera movements, especially because you've been practicing your animation skills. Alright. So this is a really cool complex scene, and it is an animation too, which is really awesome. I do have a lot of critiques, but this is really cool. So the first thing that I would do is give the lighthouse some sort of top, because looking at reference photos online, it looks like lighthouses usually have some sort of top. They usually have kind of like a roof like on a house, or they have some kind of pointy top. So adding just some sort of top right there, it doesn't have to be very big, just something very basic, but just some sort of roof to, give the lighthouse a little bit of shelter, I think would really help. And then also where the light is shining out, I think that needs to be a bit lower because the light is going to be coming from this bright area right here. And right now it looks like the light is kind of coming from up here. So just moving that down, having the light actually coming out from right here, I think would help as well. And also it is kind of white, but the lighthouse does look a bit more yellow. So if you wanted to change that and make it a bit more yellow instead, I think that would help as well. So that this color and this color are both kind of the same. Because right now this is a bit more yellow and this is pretty white. Now it looks like you might have done that kind of low poly look where everything is kind of in this little scene. Because if I just go through it right here at the starting, you can see that like the entire world is in this little cube. So if you wanted to have it like that, then just keep it. But kind of when we get in here to the animation, I think it might be better if you actually made the water a little bit bigger. So like it goes out all the way into the horizon to where you can't see it. So if you wanted to make the water really big and just kind of have it fade out into the horizon, you could do that. Or if you were going for that kind of low poly style where everything is kind of within the world, then you could just leave it with how it is. Now, something that I feel like is pretty glaring in this animation is the background. Now, the background is really bright and there are tons of stars. And the background also looks a little bit low quality and it also looks a little bit distorted. You can kind of see the pixels there in the background and it's so bright. Also the black is actually a little bit bright. Like you can see how dark like the shadows are. It almost looks like the black of the sky is actually kind of lit up and there's just way too many stars. They're really big and that's just a ton of stars. So I think maybe getting a different background image that's higher quality and has less stars and maybe has the stars a little bit smaller, I think that would help. And I did want to point out on this dock here that you added some little circles in here, and that's really cool. That's a really cool detail because I have seen that in docks. Like sometimes when they were cutting the wood from the tree to make the dock, maybe there were some little knots in the wood and then the knots kind of broke off, so there were some little holes there. So that's a really cool detail that you added in there. Now over here, when you go on the top of the lighthouse, I can see that you just added like these 4 little railings here, but on a real lighthouse, the railings would go all the way around. I actually have been in a few real lighthouses, and yeah, they have the railing all the way around so that you aren't going to fall off, obviously. I didn't actually go on the outside. They just used the outside for like cleaning the glass. But I did actually get to go in a real lighthouse and like climb up the stairs in the middle and kind of be in this glass area. But also if you just want to look at some reference images, usually the railing is going to be all the way around. I think they pretty much always are. So if you want to make that instead, like I like the modeling of the railing, but just maybe, pulling these out and then kind of connecting these areas and making it more round all the way around the lighthouse, I think that would be a lot better. Now, as far as the ocean goes, I feel like it could definitely look better, especially kind of right out here. If you look at the animation right here, it almost looks like there's just a noise texture and then it's just kind of moving along the water. But with real water, the water kind of flows into itself and then kind of bumps out and it kind of splashes and is a little bit more random. You can kind of see right there in the animation. Let me just play that again. It just kind of looks like there's a noise texture kind of moving along the water object. And that is really great that you took the time to animate the water. That's a really cool detail. But I think instead what you should use is the ocean modifier. So if you go into Blender and you add a plane and then you go to the modifiers tab, you can click on add modifier and add the ocean modifier. And there are a bunch of settings in that ocean modifier. You can actually animate it, and you can also tell it how big you want the waves to be, and you can actually animate the time of the animation, and you can also tell it how much detail you want to be in the water. So that's what I would do instead. I would add the ocean modifier on a plane and use that for the water. And then also, as you're watching through this animation, you may notice that there's a little bit of like a flash when it transitions between camera angles. So you can especially see it right over here. Right there, you can really see it really strongly. So let me just pause it. There, you can see when I paused it, it almost looks like the camera is very quickly jumping between areas. And if you wanted to have that in, then that's fine, you could leave it. But I think why this is happening is because of motion blur. So it definitely looks like you have motion blur turned on, which that's really cool. Motion blur definitely helps it to be more realistic. But what's happening in this case is the frame between when the camera's here to when the camera's here, which I'm assuming how you animated this is you just had the camera, and then one frame over, you move the camera over. And that's what I did when I was first starting out too. But the problem with this is that when you have motion blur turned on, there's actually like a couple little frames where it kind of looks like everything is being motion blurred and like pulled very strongly. Like when I paused that, everything was kind of being stretched and pulled, especially the lights. So what you can do instead is to use camera binding. And I'm actually going to show you how to do that in Blender. And that way, instead of using one camera and animating it all around, you have a bunch of cameras and you actually tell Blender to render different cameras during different times in the animation. So let me just pull up Blender and I'll show you how to do that. All right, so here I am in Blender and I'm just going to delete this and then maybe I'll move this camera right here. And then I'm just going to animate it. So I'm going to just start it high up like this. Okay, I'm just going to turn on the auto key, G, move it, and then I'm just going to move over like 100 frames and then move it down, rotate it up. Okay, so now I've animated that. So just a very simple animation. And then also let me just select everything, press T and make that linear. And there we go. Now it's a very smooth animation. So now let's say I want to switch it and have the camera kind of over here, kind of going over the cube. So if I click on this and I just go like this and then go one frame over, so now instead of being on the 100th frame, right when this camera ends, if I go to 101, I could move this camera. So just go like over here and then go Control Alt number pad 0 and then add a keyframe right there and then keep on animating and then maybe just move it over, kind of rotate it down, something like that. So it looks really good in the preview. It just looks like there's one shot right here and then there's one shot right here, and that does look good. But when you render this, you can see that there's kind of this motion blur effect happening right here. So if I just go back and then render that, you can see it's not happening. And then we go over, render that, and then there it is. And then we go one frame over, render that again. So frame 101, you can see now the same thing is happening. So there's just two little frames where it's kind of having that motion blur. Then let me go to frame 102. And now you can see it just looks fine. And that is because the motion blur is turned on. So if I turn that motion blur off and then go back one frame and render that, you can see that that looks fine. Let me go to the 100th frame, render that, and that looks fine as well. So how you fix this is you use camera binding. So what I'm going to do is just select the camera and delete this keyframe and delete this keyframe. Now what I'm going to do is I'm going to press Shift D to duplicate this camera. And then I can press Control 0, and what that'll do is it'll make this the active camera. So if you press 0, that's just going to go into the camera that's active. And how you know that the camera is active is because it has this triangle here, and this triangle is filled in. This camera is not the active camera, so when you press 0, you can't go into it. But if you press Control 0 with it selected, now that's going to become the active camera. And so now this yellow thing right here, the little yellow triangle above it, is filled in. So now if I press 0, And I'm just going to rotate this around and just do the animation. So I'm going to go right here. I'm just going to set up basically the same animation, so I'll kind of have it flying over the cube. And then I need to delete this keyframe because I duplicated the camera so it has the same keyframes. So I'll delete that, and then I'll just go over here and then kind of move up and press Ctrl Alt Numpad 0, and then just move it a little bit, bring it down a little bit. Okay, so now you can see, if you look at both of these cameras, we have the first camera which moves from frame 1 to frame 100, and then right when that one stops, this camera starts moving because this one ends at 100 and this one starts at 100. And then this one goes up like this. Okay, so now that I've done that, I need to tell it to, from frame 1 to 100, be rendering this camera, and then after that be rendering this camera. So what you do is you move to the frame that I want. I actually want to go to frame 99. And then to add a marker, here's the marker settings. So you can click on that and just click on add marker, or you just move your mouse over the timeline and press M, and that's going to add a marker. Now you can select this marker, you can drag it around. You can also select it and deselect it with the A key. So you can see if I press A to deselect or select, you can see that it's being selected and now it's deselected. So what I need to do is I need to bind this camera to the marker because I want it to have this camera be the active camera up to frame 100, but then frame 100 and for the rest of the animation, I want it to be this camera. So I'm going to select this camera, and I'm also going to select this marker in the timeline, and I'll just move over right here to the marker. Now to do this, you can click on marker and then click on bind camera to markers, or you can move your mouse over the timeline and press Control B. And again, before you do this, make sure that you have the marker selected, and then also make sure that you have the camera that you want to be bound to that marker selected. Then you press Control B with your mouse over the timeline, and you can see that it says camera. So that is the name of the camera. The name of this camera is camera.001, but because this was the first camera that we added, this is just called camera. So now that we've bound that to this marker, if we play through it, that looks great, and this camera is the active camera. On frame 100, we want it to switch so that on frame 100, this is the active camera. So to do that, we need to add another marker and then bind it to that camera. So let's go to frame 100 now, press M to add a new marker, and you can see if I zoom in here, there it is, and then make sure this is selected, and then hover your mouse over that and make sure that that marker is selected, and then again you can press marker, bind camera to markers, or just press Control B with your mouse over the timeline. And when I do that, you can see that now, because we're on frame 100, this becomes the active camera and it has the triangle filled. So you can see that frame 1 to 99, this is the active camera, and then when I go over here, now the rest of this one is the active camera, and it actually gives you a visual representation of this. So when you go into the camera by pressing 0 on the number pad, you can play through this, and look at that, the camera switches which one is the active camera. So it actually looks like what it's going to be rendered. And because of this, you can now render out your scene, and you're not going to have that problem with the motion blur being stretched, those few little frames. So it is a little bit harder, and it does take a bit more work. And again, I remember when I was first learning Blender, I made the same mistake, but I finally figured out how to do this, and this is a lot better. So I would definitely recommend doing this instead. And if you have multiple camera shots, like for instance, when I hit 2,000 subscribers, I did the 2,000 monkey heads that were falling down. I did like that simulation, and I had the camera like kind of moving all around. I did that. And you can do this for multiple cameras. So if you wanted to do it again, you would just add another camera, animate it, and then do the same exact thing. But when you're doing multiple ones, you don't need to do 2 of them. So for instance, if I were just to duplicate this camera and rotate it around and just kind of put it over here, and then I'll just delete the animation keyframes of this camera because I don't want this camera to be moving the exact same as this one. So I will delete those keyframes. Once you're doing a 3rd one and a 4th one and so on, you don't actually need to make more markers. You can just press M to add a marker and then make sure this is selected, and then just press Control B. And now you can see that it's going to be this one. So it's going to be using the second camera. So this is the first camera, and from frame 1 to 99, it's using this one. Then the second one, this one is from 100 to 124. And then because we added another marker right here, this one, when it hits 125 frames, it flips to this one being the active camera. So now we can just watch through this just to make sure it looks good. So it goes up like that, and Now it switches to the next one, and then it switches to the last one right there. Now, as far as the kind of mood goes for the camera animation, right now I feel like it has a very intense feel because it's moving around quite fast and the camera angles change quite a bit, and wherever the camera moves, the lighthouse is kind of like searching. And later on in the video here, it also looks like, it goes underwater, and that's really cool. And then it like shows the fish kind of swimming away, kind of like the lighthouse was kind of like looking for it or searching for it, like right there. And so I feel like the camera movements give a very intense kind of action-y mood to the scene. Now that is cool, and if you were going for that, then that's great. But personally, I think with how this scene is, I think it would be a bit nicer if this had more of a calm feel. Now, you can totally ignore this if you wanted to go for kind of an intense feel, but I think a calm feel would be better. So what I would do is just kind of have the camera slowly moving so that you can see everything a little bit better, kind of be a little bit farther out and just show things a little bit slower. And that way it should be a little bit more calm, because right now, it's kind of a nighttime scene that also seems more calm, especially like these, all these stars kind of right here, and also like the lamppost and all that. Just overall, I feel like this scene would feel a bit nicer if it had a bit more calm mood to it. So I would make the camera movements a little bit more slow, and I would also have it change angles a little bit slower as well. And also like right there when the camera kind of tipped and rotated, that kind of makes it feel very actiony and fast and a little bit disorienting. So I would make that pretty smooth and kind of have it slowly moving around and not really rotate it very much. But that's just my personal opinion. If you wanted to make this a very like intense feel, like, having the camera move all around kind of like you did and having the lighthouse kind of searching and stuff, then I think you did a good job on that if you wanted to give it an intense feel. And then the last thing that I would do to improve this is to change the stripes a little bit on the lighthouse, because again, looking at reference images of lighthouses, I found that most lighthouses actually weren't striped at an angle, like they were just side to side instead of going down, but some lighthouses also kind of went around in a circle. So if you wanted to have those lighthouses going around in a circle, what I would do is make the stripes bigger, so a bigger red area and then a bigger white area, and then also I would have them all connect. Because right now, all of those red stripes and white stripes, they're connecting with each other, but there's not one big red stripe which is going all the way down. So I would either make one big red strip which is all connected and going all the way down, or just have these stripes going back and forth straight and don't make them at an angle. So that's what I would do to improve this animation, but this is really cool. So thank you Kiko Does CG for sending in this animation. Alright, and this next one is another animation, and this one is from Salvatore. And you said that you'd like feedback, especially about the modeling, lighting, texture, and movement of the paper. So let's just watch through this. It does have like some city sounds in the background, although you can't hear it in the video. So this is really cool. It's very realistic. I really like it. You added in a lot of details. I really like the depth of field. Like you had it blurring right here, and it's a little bit blurred here, and then kind of more in focus around here. And you even added like a little bit of fog or something right there, and you added in a lot of texture detail. Like you even took the time to add a little bit of texture like in grunge and stuff onto these pipes and stuff, and especially like right here. Really good stuff. It's really realistic. I really like the texturing, the lighting, and the modeling. It's all really realistic, and I don't have much critiques. The only critique that I have is the movement and animation of like the different papers and like the trash from the city. So just looking at those pieces, it looks way too fast. There would have to be like a super strong wind for it to be going that fast. It almost looks like it's kind of on a time lapse. And especially right here, you can see like this piece right here, it's not really blowing around in the breeze. Usually if it were, blowing around in the wind or whatever, it'd be kind of flapping and kind of like moving and flowing around. But it kind of just looks like it's like going around kind of randomly, and it feels very flat and straight. Like you can only see it from this view. See how it's like kind of pointed at you. It's not kind of moving, it's not rotating, and it's also not bending at all, whereas like a paper or cardboard or some kind of trash would be bending a lot in the breeze. And it's also moving way too fast, I think. It's just really moving around quite fast. It kind of looks like with how fast it's moving, there would have to be really, really strong winds, and it'd probably be banging into like the different pipes and things. And these different little pieces of trash and stuff, it kind of looks like they're almost going through the other objects because I don't really know where they come from. They just randomly appear. So how I would fix this is to probably make most of the trash a little bit farther away, kind of over here. Maybe a couple of pieces kind of drift in from like here or over from the back. And then I would make the speed a lot slower. And then also I would probably add the cloth simulation to them and then add like a force field or a wind force field or something like that. And then have them kind of flap around. And you could also like animate the wind to kind of push it around different areas and, you know, push it one way and then push it another way. And also just making it a lot slower. I really like the textures though that you used. It looks very like grungy and old and dirty. But yeah, with how they are right now, they're just kind of a bit flat and they move way too fast and they just feel a bit unrealistic. Especially right here. If you look right there, let me just play that again. Right there, you can see it kind of comes down and it almost looks like it's going through that trash dumpster. Like it looks like it's going through it and then it just randomly kind of stops and goes way up. So how this would be better is if it kind of slowly flowed over and it was kind of bending and twisting. Maybe it bumps against the trash can or the garbage dumpster and then kind of floats away a bit slower. And also how you can do that, how you can make it bump against objects is you can turn on the collision physics. So you just select the objects and then add the collision. And then if you add a cloth simulation to the pieces of paper and trash, then it will collide with the other objects that you've added the collision physics onto. So those are my critiques, but this is really quite good. I really like the grungy textures that you added, and like the fence here, it kind of looks like it's been cracked or broken, and especially right down here, like that little pipe you added in, that little grunge there in the metal texture. So this is really quite good, and thank you Salvatorn for sending in this animation. Alright, and this next one is a Blender file, and this comes from Caitlyn. So Caitlyn did my complete Blender beginner tutorial series, and she was struggling with a few things and had a few questions about like the particle system and a few different things like that. So she sent her Blender file in, and that way I can show her how I would improve this and get over those problems that she was having with the Blender file. And so you were asking me some questions in the YouTube comments. You were wondering how to better place the grass because the grass really wasn't going where you wanted it to be. And then you were also wondering how to make the Blender file less dense. So if there's any way to like delete vertices that the camera can't see so that the Blender file is less dense. So I'll show you how to do both of those things. And you may have noticed that there's no textures here. So what I did is I just went to the world and I found the HDRI that you used. So I just downloaded the same HDRI and then added that in. And then also I didn't have the same exact texture that you used. So I just used the base color that you had here. Alright, so you were wondering how to get the grass to fit better on the scene. Because right now it looks like most of the grass is actually out of the scene. So if you click on the ground and you go right down here to the particle settings and then click on the grass, and in the tutorial we added weight painting. So on this object you go into weight paint and then we painted it and we told Blender to put the grass just where the painting is. So if I go back into object mode, this is what you painted, so let me turn it back into object mode. So on the density here we added the group, and that way it's going to put the grass where we painted. The problem with this is that this is turned on, and so because this is turned on, it switches it. So instead of the grass going where we painted it in the weight painting, it puts the grass where we didn't weight paint it. So if I click on this button, now it's going to switch back, and now the grass is in the scene. So that already looks a lot better. And then I believe you wanted to put the grass in more specific areas, and you also like wanted to keep the grass off of like the road and stuff because the grass wouldn't just grow through the concrete unless there was like a crack in the concrete or something. And I wish I would have mentioned this in my tutorial, but there is actually a way to turn these into objects after you make the particle system. So I will show you how to do that. So if you go right over here to the modifiers, make sure this object is selected, you can see that there are two particle systems. And if you click on this button right here, it'll take you over to the particles. There's the grass and then there's the rocks. And you can see if I hide these, it's going to hide the rocks or hide the grass. So because we have two particle systems, there are two particle system modifiers. Now the bottom one I know is the grass one, because if I click on this, you can see the grass disappears. Now you can see that there is this convert button. If you click on this convert button, it's actually going to turn these into objects. So we just converted it. And now you can see if I select the grass pieces and start to move them, nope, that's the wrong one, click again, you can see that now it's converted it and it's added those in as actual objects. Now, on every single part of the grass, we have 2 of them because we converted it. So what it did is it kept the particle system, but it added all the grass where the grass is. And so now that we have that grass applied there, we can actually just remove this. So if we just click right here, we can click on this and then minus that, and that's going to get rid of the grass particle system. But because we converted it, you can see that now these are all individual objects. So now you can just manually play around with the grass, and the particle system did most of the work for us. It did, 95% of the work. Now, if we just want to play around with this, we can just move it around, grab the different objects, just pull them around and rotate them, and you can get it to how you like. And if you want to, duplicate some pieces, scale them down, just kind of move them around. But if we were to do this manually across the entire scene, that would take a long time and it would be a lot of work. So doing it like this is a lot easier, and most of the grass is already placed where we want to be, and for most of the stuff it looks fine, but then just a few little pieces here and there you can manually move that around. So that's what I would do if some of the grass pieces were in the road and you wanted to move them out of the road. That's what I would do to fix that. Now another thing is you can see right here there is the grass particles, and you can actually see this one right here kind of floating. And so here is the grass collection that we made in the tutorial. What you can do is you can click on the checkbox and that will get rid of it from the view, but the particle system is still there. Now we delete the particle system, but it would still be there. But the collection that we use for the particle system is just hidden, so now we can't see it. And also if you want to do that for the rocks, I believe this is the rocks, yeah. If you want to turn this off, you could do that as well. Okay, and then again in the YouTube comments, you were asking about how to make the scene less dense, so how to delete some vertices that are not in the view, and you can totally do that. That's actually pretty easy to do, and when I'm working on really big scenes, I do it all the time. So how you do it is just go into the camera view and just see what the camera's seeing. You can play the animation just to make sure you know what the camera can see and can't see, and then go to where the camera zoomed all the way out and select the plane or the big environment or ground. Then you can tab into edit mode, and I'm going to press Z, move my mouse over, go into wireframe and let go, and then press A to deselect everything. Now I can press C, and that's going to go to the circle select, and I can click and drag and just go around the camera, okay? So once I've gone around the camera, I can go out here and you can see what the camera can see and what it can't. So now I can again press C to go to the circle select, just go along here and select anything that I don't need, okay, and select that as well. Now I can press X and delete vertices, and you can see the camera can't really see any difference. You really wouldn't know that the ground is kind of cut off there, because the camera can't see it. And you could also do that for the hills in the background. So again, Z, move your mouse over, let go and go to wireframe, tab into edit mode, A to deselect, and then you could press C for the circle select, or you could press B in this case for the box select and just box select this, and then press X and delete vertices. Also just box select this, X, delete vertices. And now when you go into rendered mode, you're not going to be able to tell any difference. And so now that we've done that, you could, if you wanted to, press B for the box select and just select some of these particles as well that you can't see, like out here and out here. And then you could delete them, and that'll make the scene a little less dense. And then just one more thing that I noticed, it looks like the door here and also the door on the mailbox, it looks like the normals need to be flipped because you can see the shading looks a little bit weird. This is kind of dark, whereas this is kind of light. So if you just want to select these, tab into edit mode, press A to select everything, and then press Shift N, that'll recalculate the normals. And let's see about this one, something seems to be up here. Tab into edit mode, Shift N, and it looks like I'll need to click on right behind me the recalculate normals. You can click on inside, and there we go, and now it's flipped. But as far as the animation goes and the modeling and everything, I looked over this Blender file and it looks really good. The modeling seems really great, and I really like the overall look of this and the finished render. It looks really nice. So great job on this, Caitlyn. I hope that the beginner tutorial series was helpful, and I hope that this critique was helpful as well. So thank you for sending in this artwork. And then this last one here is again from my complete Blender beginner tutorial series, and this is from Prashanthapa. And they just wanted overall feedback for the scene. And so again, what I did is just went into the materials and deleted the textures, and then I found the same HDRI and added it into the scene. So overall, it does look really great. There are just a few things that I would do to improve this. So the first thing that I would do is rotate the light, because if I go into rendered mode here, you can see that the light is directly pointing at the scene, and the problem with this is that it makes everything blown out. It's kind of like if you took a camera and turned the flash on, and maybe it was like kind of in a dark room, or you were close up to the subject and you took the picture and it just flashed, and the flash just flashed right on whatever you were taking the picture of, and it just makes everything kind of look flat and blown out. So you can barely see any shadows here. You can see a little bit of a shadow here, but it is really bright and just pointing right at the scene. So this sunlight right here, I would select it, double tap R, and rotate it over. And you can see immediately, at least I think, that looks a lot better. You can see that now the house has a shadow to it, and also like the trees have shadows right down there and stuff. It just doesn't look as blown out. It looks a bit more natural. I would also make the strength down a little bit. So right now it's 8. I think I'd make it more like a 6 or maybe even a 5. And the color here, I'd probably make it a little bit more yellow. And you can see now I think that looks a lot better, because before it was just pointed right at the scene from the front on, and it looked kind of blown out. But now there's like shadows underneath the tree branches and things like that. Now, as far as the modeling for the trees goes, I feel like they're a little bit flat, because this one, it's all flat from this view, and this one, it's kind of all flat from here. So what I would do is just tab into edit mode, go into wireframe, and just press C for the circle select or B for the box select. Just select some of the branches, and then you can press R to rotate, G to grab, and just kind of make it a little bit more three-dimensional. So instead of it being super flat, just something like that, kind of pull it out maybe, and then grab this, kind of rotate it over, just stick it in like that. And that way the tree is a lot more 3D, because this just kind of seems flat right here, and this one right here kind of seems flat like this. Now these pieces right here, what I would do, they also just seem a little bit flat like this. So I would press O to turn on proportional editing, and just select some of the vertices and just pull them around a little bit. Using the scroll wheel to change how big that proportional editing is. And then also again, just some of these branches, like maybe this branch, tab into edit mode, wireframe, go into wireframe and just box select some of these. So like this, and then you can go to top view and rotate it. Oh, and maybe I need to turn off the proportional editing. Then just rotate it a little bit and just make it a bit more three-dimensional. And then maybe, you know, put this one up here, and then just select this one, rotate it over a little bit. You don't have to do much, but already now that one's kind of popping out this way. This one has one coming out, and that one as well. You could just select some of the branches and just rotate them and give them a little bit more 3 dimensions. So maybe make this one going this way, and then maybe this one, maybe rotate it the opposite way. So I'm just going to select it. And then let's go into wireframe, rotate it maybe this way. And then you're going to need to grab the branches or the brush from the tree and just kind of rotate that. All right, now looking at the grass particles, they look pretty repetitive, because you can see like all these pretty repetitive, all those really repetitive. So let's go ahead and play around with that. So right here, I'm going to turn on the grass, and then let's just take a look at these. So you can see especially these ones right here. If I just move these, I don't know why, but for some reason there were like a bunch of pieces of grass on top of each other. So I'm actually going to delete some of them, because it looks like some of them are like exactly the same. I'll keep that one. These ones look pretty similar, so I'll delete that one. These ones are pretty good. I really like these. These are great. And I don't know why, but for some reason there's like some grass here and then some grass here. So we'll fix that as well. So let me just delete this one. We'll just do these. So I'm going to tab into edit mode, Z for wireframe. And then A to just make sure everything is deselected. We can box select these and then press X and delete vertices. Okay, now if you want to make these look different from the other ones, you could go into wireframe here, just box select some of these and kind of rotate them, bring them up, just kind of make them look a little bit different. I'm going to double tap A to select everything, and then press Shift D to duplicate, R to rotate, and just kind of stick it in there. I think the grass looks better if they're more in clumps instead of like this. They're kind of all in a row like that. And they're also really repetitive, which doesn't look very good. And then also I'm just going to change some of these. So I don't want them to all look exactly the same. So some of them are going to be longer. Some of them are going to be shorter. Like these two look the same except they're mirrored. So I'll just like make this one a little bit longer, something like that. Just make it look different. And then also like this one, for some reason, these are all pointed like the same direction. So I'll just delete those and maybe just leave that at 1 clump. And then again, this one, delete these, and we can just kind of duplicate these, rotate them around. If I press 1 to go to front view, then I can kind of rotate this and just change them. But yeah, I do think it looks better if all of the grass comes from one area for each clump. And then again, just like selecting some areas, kind of rotating them and changing them so that they look a little bit different. Now already, I think that looks a lot better. If you go into the camera view here, just go into rendered mode or just material preview, I think that already looks a bit better. That way it doesn't look quite as repetitive. Now to make them look even less repetitive, you can give them random rotations. So if you select the plane here and go right here to the particles, click on the grass one, and you're going to need to turn on advanced. And when I turn on advanced, there's going to be more settings. So I can go down here and go to rotation, just turn this on, and then the phase, I can turn this all the way up, and then the random phase, I can turn this all the way up too. And now they look even more random because the rotation is different for each one. So it's a lot harder to tell that they're actually, some of them are similar to the other ones. Then also you could play around with the random scale. That'll make them look even more random. And then personally, I would probably turn up the number to make there be a lot more. Now, as far as the weight painting goes, if I go right here and go into weight painting, I would definitely improve this because like right here, there isn't very much. So if I just go right up here to the weight paint settings and I click on this and go to add, I can add more. I think I might turn the strength down a bit and make the brush bigger with F. And then I would just go around here and make a lot more grass wherever the camera can see it, because there was just kind of a little strip of grass and then it ended. But of course you don't want the grass to be underneath the concrete. So be careful not to put it underneath the concrete. But yeah, like here, going along here, of course, this is just my personal opinion, but I think that would make it better. And with the house here, you could leave the grass out of it, like out of the yard. Maybe it looks like a mowed grass, so there's not as much grass in the yard. But I would probably make there be a little bit of grass. So just turning the strength way down, just going along here and adding just a little bit of grass everywhere so that there's at least just some grass everywhere. And probably like right here too, just making it so there can be a little bit more grass. Okay, let's go back into object mode, and I think that looks a lot better. Maybe also just turning the number up a little bit more, and then going down here and making the scale just a little bit smaller. And then the last thing that I would do is I would make these dark areas a bit lighter in the house. So at first I didn't know why these were so dark, because I went inside here. If I just go inside here, I went inside here and I was like, oh, okay, there's a light. So that's what I did in my tutorial. I added a light, and that way when you go into rendered mode, you should be able to see some light coming from the house, because there would probably be lights in the house, because the people in the house wouldn't want to be sitting in darkness. So I thought maybe it was like an issue with the rendering. So I like went to the render properties, and I looked here at the light paths because maybe that was an issue, but that wasn't the problem. I went over here to the materials and I took a look at the glass material, and that looks fine. And then I finally realized, if I just click on the house and hide it, I finally realized that there was a cube inside the house. And because there was a cube inside the house, that light couldn't get through. So you can see there's the light and there's the cube. So if I just delete this cube, press Alt-H to unhide that house. Now when I go into rendered mode, let's just go back to the layout here, you can see that now there's actually a little bit of light coming through the glass, and it does look a little bit better. So there we go, that's how I would improve this scene, but this really is quite good. I hope that beginner tutorial series was helpful, and thank you for watching that series. So thank you Prashanthapa for sending in this artwork. So that's going to be it for my 5th art critique video. Thank you everyone for sending in your artworks, and I hope this is going to help you to improve your work as an artist. And again, if you'd like to be in the next art critique video, I try to do critique videos about every 2 weeks. So if you'd like to be in the next art critique video, then you can submit your artwork through the Google form that I provided with the link in the video description. With that said, thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in a future video.